There we go. But in true Neil fashion, it took me a good 3 years to actually pluck up the courage to ask her out on a date. For those of you again that know me well, that's half the course basically. And it wasn't until after a group holiday, lots of us here today went to Ibiza, that I finally realised that at least not to try and ask her out would have been unacceptably pathetic on my part. So evidently I did ask Millie out, and here we are getting married, which is, I'm very glad I made that decision. But this decision to actually ask Millie out was made a lot more difficult by a special man here today, David Thompson. Now, David's recently moved out to Dubai, and he said, if I come... Well, firstly, he demanded to be an usher, but that wasn't the only reason I made you an usher. Secondly, if I come, will you talk about me in your speech? So, here we go. On the night before I asked Millie out, so somewhat weirdly, I was sleeping in a bed with Dave, which is something that hasn't happened that often, unfortunately. But I have no idea why I asked him for advice, because if you know Dave's relationship history, it's interesting at best. I asked him, you know, what should I do? Should I ask Millie out? You know, I really have these strong feelings for her. And he looked me straight in the eye and said, don't bother, there's no chance of success, she's not interested. Luckily I didn't take his advice, and I recommend, if whoever you're sitting next to, don't listen to him. Ever. That's not fair, Dave, I love you, and listen to him. So when I was writing the speech, I looked back at the last 4 years we've been together, and I tried to think about what I'd learned perhaps about Millie in the last few years, and I wanted to... Millie's looking worried because I ran a little bit of the speech past her and she said, don't do it, Neil. Please don't do it, but I'm going to do it. But I'll start with a good thing. I think there's a lot more to Millie than meets the eye. I think one of the biggest things is she has a real steely determination to get things done. I know I don't give her enough credit for it, and I don't think people do. And Michael's already talked about the fact that she's finally going to be gainfully employed as a teacher. And I think a good example of this steely determination is her really breezing through the PGCE, which by all accounts is a very difficult qualification to get. But Millie really has been remarkably relaxed about the whole thing. There are a couple of tears, but generally very, very good. And I think really Millie is a natural born teacher, and I think that when she starts in Garden House in September, she's going to be a huge success. And I think perhaps this ability to communicate with very small children sets her up quite well for a lifetime with me, so I'm very lucky about that. Now this is a bit Millie's not really going to like. And it's an interesting little quirk about Millie. I don't know how many people really know it, but she can sometimes be a little bit liberal with the truth. She's not a liar. I promised I wouldn't say the word lie. She's not lying. It's never malicious, but sometimes when you put her under pressure, she tends to say things that she perhaps thinks you want to hear, and I want to illustrate this with an example. I came home from work one day, I've got this little laptop that I'm quite proud of, and picked it up, turned it on, it wasn't working properly, and there were all these little scratches on the bottom. So I turned to Millie and said, Millie, what's happened to my laptop? I don't know, she replied. Okay, you sure you haven't dropped my laptop? No, she replied. Okay, so I left it for the night, went to work, came back the next day. Millie, are you sure you haven't dropped my laptop? I asked. The next reply was, I don't remember. So you did drop it, Millie, I said. And then it comes to maybe. That's as far as I've got yet, but I'm going to ask her every day, I think, for our married life. Until she finally says, yes, Neil, I dropped the laptop, now I've got a job, I'll buy you a new one. I'm not sure that's ever actually going to happen. The only other major faults that I found with Millie so far, she's very bad at driving and navigating, which causes us no end of stress, and she's got a really quite worrying addiction to scampi fries. I was going to tell another story now, but it involves Jesus, and I don't think I should, but those are, in 3.5 years, they're the biggest faults I found in Millie, and I think, I'm sure I'll find more, but I think the fact that I've gone 3.5 years with only finding that makes me a very lucky man indeed.
Yeah.
Finally, I think I've learned that, as Michael spoke about earlier, that she really is the most kind, generous and loving person I think you could ever hope to meet. I think obviously at weddings people always say that about their wives, but I think in the case of Millie it really is true, and I think those of you who know her realise that, or know that she will do anything she can to make not just me happy, but anyone she knows, any of her friends happy, and it's incredible. And I think it's quite lucky because I'm inherently a very selfish individual. The fact that Millie's so unselfish, I think, balances out a little bit. And this is a horribly, horribly cheesy line, and this is what I warned you about earlier on. But I really think that being with Millie every day makes me a slightly better man. and I really dread to think what sort of person I'd be if she wasn't in my life. I can't really imagine it, although I think some of you probably can. But don't talk to my family about that. I wanted to finish by recanting what a very good friend of mine, who's actually here tonight, I'm not going to name him because I just think it might be weird. But when I was discussing the future of my relationship with Millie over a nice rare steak, and I asked him whether he thought that proposing to Millie would be a good idea, and he looked me straight in the eye, and he's not one who's known for sentimentality or guff. And he just said that not to spend the rest of my life with Millie would be to pass up my only real opportunity of true happiness. And I think he was absolutely right, and I really can't wait for the rest of I can see her crying. Yes, it worked. I can't wait for what I hope to be our happy lives to begin. And I don't think this is what you're meant to do, but I'd like you all again to be upstanding, please. And if I could propose, you can have a lot of toast, but a toast to my beautiful, beautiful bride, Millie, who's still crying. That was a bit shorter than Michael.